Not the best week to not have Shane Beamer talking today.
Yeah, we'd like to know a few answers, to say the least.
I think I'd like to hear more. We didn't get to a lot of Shane Beamer yesterday. I did hear Terry. I think he said that they played. I see it now, number 28 from yesterday. Beamer on the teleconference on firing Shula.
Mm-hmm.
We did hear from Shane late Sunday, about 5 o'clock in his afternoon teleconference. But yeah, I think there's still a lot of questions we all have as it pertains to this situation and what it's going to look like going forward as this team tries to get bowl eligible and save the season. And as I said yesterday, Tyler, bowl eligibility. Whew, it's going to be a rough show. Is actually important. It's actually important. It also means nothing. And those two things can go hand in hand.
Sure.
It's important because you do get the extra practices for whatever young player you want to play. It's kind of important because you force, I hate to say this like this, but you kind of force Lenora Sellers to declare his hand a little bit.
Yeah. Well, and we talked about earlier, it also forces the hand of guys making decisions with the portal, which, again, now opens up in
January 2nd.
Early January. But still, a lot of guys will opt out, before then, or guys that do opt out get kind of an idea of what the deal is. So it can kind of help speed the process along of the offseason moves that are going to be happening on your roster. So there's a lot of benefit to it. Again, it doesn't mean what it used to 15, 20, even 7-8 years ago. But it does serve a purpose.
Yeah, let's be clear. 6-6 is a massive disappointment. 6-6 is not the goal. 6-6, you get the point. All those little things is what it is. But the bottom line is getting to bowl eligibility is important. Now, to do that, you got to get through Texas A&M, Coastal, and Clemson. We now know the Texas A&M game will be a noon, like a dead set noon game, not 12:45. It'll be a noon game. If you're looking for a break, I think you got one. I said it yesterday. I'll say it today. I'll say it next week. Couldn't find that path to beating Mississippi.
No.
I wasn't sure what that was. Getting the noon game against Texas A&M, where it's an 11 a.m. kick out there, their crowd doesn't have the time to get all juiced up. They're not the kind of crowd that gets themselves juiced starting at 5 a.m. like LSU or Georgia or other schools.
Well, they have to stay up late for midnight Yale practice anyway.
In what is the most awkward tradition in college football or all of sports. So we'll talk about that today. We'll kind of continue to analyze. How did we arrive here? I think that's what we all are trying to digest a little bit, is how we have arrived at 3-6, how we have arrived at a quarterback that, by all accounts, by the way, at least from what I've seen, Tyler, you correct me if I'm wrong, you see a few more things than I do, is still projected, essentially, I'm just going to round way out, still projected in the top 50 picks, essentially.
Yeah, and
that's about that's a first round and a half.
And for the next 3 games that you're guaranteed to play, that's not really going to change.
I don't think so.
No. So, again, it brings up the debate of, okay, he has the option of likely being a later first-round pick, high second-round pick at this point in time, or coming back for another year. Again, I lean towards he's probably going to go with the NFL, because what you risk coming back for another year is dropping even further if your next season doesn't go well. Because
you risk cementing this season as that's who you are.
Yes, exactly. And right now, again, draft prognosticators still look at, and the experts in the NFL still look at his physical ability and gifts and say, okay, well, he's just not in the best situation right now, but if we get him in here, we'll be able to get him to the place we need to be. Again, we rank up Anthony Richardson as per example as a guy who never really wowed you at Florida, but his physical ability was so crazy special that the Colts took him at the 4th pick in the draft, and obviously hasn't worked out, but those are the kind of guys that do get picked up. Trey Lance was another example. He didn't have a huge sample size when he was at North Dakota State, starting only part of that one season, but they're like, man, this guy's got everything that we want in a quarterback, and Kyle Shanahan, of all people, said, hey, I can make this guy into a quarterback. Unfortunately, it didn't happen, and now he's labeled as a bust, but those kind of picks do happen a lot.
You think they'd learn?
You think they would.
You'd think they'd learn. They haven't. They haven't. And
What
they won't.
Josh Allen? I mean, was a guy that was a project quarterback, and he's turned into one of the best in the league. Jordan Love was a guy that couldn't stop throwing picks when he was at Nevada or Utah State, sorry, and now he's one of the better quarterbacks in the league as well.
So, anyway, but we'll talk a lot about that today and discuss how we arrived here and what the question is what is the next step? And there's two smaller. See, you do the little mafia police chart there. You got your head boss at the top, and then underneath it, you start to build out the tree. And obviously, the main question is going to be like, who is going to be the offensive coordinator?
Mm-hmm.
But underneath that is the big question of, does Shane Beamer change his philosophy? Can the zebra change his stripes and go away from the pro-style offense that he wants to run to what I would deem more of a college-esque spread them out system? And I don't – we've seen it at times. Dow Loggins has run more of a spread-out system. Marcus Satterfield ran more at times. And it seems like, I don't know, when a spread-out system has worked, that's what I'm going to call it, is a spread-out system where you don't have everybody bunched right there at the line of scrimmage. It's worked. But they've also mixed in what feels like extremely vanilla running plays to go along with these bunch sets that just don't work.
Yeah, there's always that. And Terry and I were talking about this earlier. Pro style has taken on such a different connotation than what it used to. Pro style used to mean I formation, 3 yards in the cloud of dust, everything done from under center.
I go with the on the old video game, the split backs.
Yeah, 2-back sets.
2-back, one on the left, one on the right behind you. Yeah,
it's not the same because the NFL is not the same. Like the NFL runs a lot of variations of things. So pro style doesn't mean what it did 15 and even 20 years ago and stuff like that. But you're right, playing a lot of things in close is kind of a signature of that style of offense. Where you look at other places like Tennessee's the most extreme example, where everything that they play is out at the perimeters because they truly spread you out for that type of offense where you have to declare what you're doing when it comes to how many guys you put in the box. And obviously they have success with it. And Josh Heupel's a guru of that type of offense for a reason. So you maybe don't have to go that extreme, but something a little bit more college-esque that that hopefully can benefit you. Because again, as we talked about, this is the most important hire of the Beamer tenure. He's got to get this right because if the offense is in the toilet again this time next year, we're not talking about finding a new OC. We're talking about finding a new head coach.
Yeah, that's right. And and there's going to be a ways to go. Today is November the 4th.
4th.
I don't have. By the way, I got no computer today. I left my computer down. I'm playing without a net. There's going to be a lot of times I go, what? Just because I don't have like the date and time right directly. I do have it in front of me with 3 different screens, but I never look at those. Maybe a month.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what the time frame on this is. Signing day, the early signing period is December 3rd through the 5th. So you get the timeline there. You mentioned it. The transfer portal is January 2nd, opens January 2nd. So in other words, you've got time to appease some wide receivers, Lenore Sellers, some offensive line, whomever.
Mm-hmm.
Whomever y'all look at and deem a flight risk, you got time to appease those guys. The recruiting class seems okay. I think by all accounts, Chris and Wes and JC and Hal McGranahan and John Whittle, all your insiders have reported Landon Duckworth seems maybe happier. Very possible. But he seems fine. It seems like the recruiting class is good. Amari Thomas, the running back, keeps faking visits to Florida State, but apparently is not taking them. So by all accounts, your recruiting class is good, but I don't know if you feel, because you do have a jump start, and we all know how this works, even though it's tampering and it's behind closed doors, you just can't tell me that Shane Beamer hadn't reached out the third party. Hey, find out if that guy's interested in our job. And
it doesn't always have to be an A to B communication. It can be, all right, I'm gonna call an agent, I'm gonna call somebody that knows, and just pass along that we might be interested. Type thing. And you gotta test the waters a little bit. And again, you're still trying to finish out your own season, but you have to make these decisions pretty quickly because the season ends on November 30th. And then just a handful of days later, you got early signing day. So you're signing your class. And again, it sounds like the recruits are relatively good, but you want to get that hire done as soon as possible. And then obviously you have the transfer portal coming open in early January, which it's better than being in mid-December trying to figure all this stuff out at one time. But you'd like to have your hire done well before Christmas, and have all that rolling. So when the portal opens up, boom, you're ready to go, and guys know what they're coming into, and maybe, just maybe, you hire an offensive coordinator and you bring some guys along with them, because that's a common thing that we see in college football these days.
That is precisely right. So, all right, we'll dig a lot into that. College basketball got going. Did you get into college basketball last night?
I did. I got into a little bit of Arizona and Florida. I watched the last few minutes in overtime of Auburn narrowly escaping Bethune-Cookman. Did you see any of that?
No.
That was a wild game.
Was that on SEC Network?
It was SEC Network Plus.
Okay. All right.
It was kind of, and there's 10,000 games going on at one time. So you can't keep up with all of it, but just kind of scrolling through the scores, I'm like, Bethune-Cookman has a lead with about 3 minutes to go. Let's see what's going on here. And Stephen Pearl, he was wearing a white pullover, so I couldn't see the sweat on him, but he apparently, the little signboard that sits at the score table, he apparently broke that at one point during the game, a few pieces off of it out of frustration, I guess. And look, Bethune-Cookman was jacking threes left and right. They put up one at the buzzer, which and the guy gets fouled at midcourt. The guy for Bethune-Cookman makes all three of his free throws with half a second left, send the game to overtime, and then overtime kind of went sideways and Auburn ends up winning it. But, man, Bethune-Cookman made him sweat it out for a team that had never beaten a ranked opponent or an SEC opponent in school history. They took him to the limit yesterday. That was fun to watch.
The women got going last night, 94-54. Yeah. I feel like that was calling the dogs off.
Can we complain about officiating yet? Because, my God.
Go right ahead.
And for one, this game being on the SEC Network Plus, they didn't have the mid-quarter stoppage. So they let the quarters run through, I think, until the fourth quarter for some reason. I'm not sure what the television rules are for that. So I'm like, okay, this game will flow by pretty quickly. Women's basketball typically done in under 2 hours. It was well past 9 o'clock before this thing ended. And that drives me crazy because you have a game that's not even close. Why are we blowing the whistle? Why are we reviewing everything? What are we doing?
So we'll let Tyler hash that out. Make sure we get any anger that he's got off his chest there. We'll get to that. Tonight, you can hear it right here on 107.5 at the game. South Carolina will take on North Carolina A&T. We'll do a 6:30 pregame for you. 7 o'clock with Judge Manning and Derek Scott as they get the season going with North Carolina A&T. If you go, take a couple extra dollars with you, not just to buy a hot dog, but to purchase a program.
Yeah.
You're going to need it to kind of...
You're not going to recognize many folks.
Yeah. But they look entertaining. That game also, I believe, SEC Network Plus.
SEC Network Plus,
okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
For reference, NCAA is 3:53 in Ken Palm.
Yeah.
So hopefully that bodes well for South Carolina. North Florida did not get the season started off on the right foot, and apparently the Ospreys were an omen for what the season was going to be.
Yeah. Tonight, I didn't look. I haven't looked, and I didn't even think about it till just now. Thank goodness I'm not a degenerate, I don't think. But I don't know what the point spread is on tonight's game. I'll get that during the break. But South Carolina, North Carolina A&T, we're going to talk some basketball as well. So a lot to get to today. Also, we never really got around to it yesterday. Auburn's open.
Mm-hmm.
Who loses in musical chairs?
A lot of people.
Musical coaching chairs here. We're gonna go down a path with that today. 803-404-6100. You're listening to Tyler Head. Captain David Dare's back. Bill Gunner. It is the halftime show. It is 12:20, round up by 10 seconds, on your Tuesday. Normally we'd be doing a Talking Tuesday, and Shane Beamer would be coming to you in about 41 minutes. That is not happening today. He is on a bye week, and that means now I would assume. Actually, I don't know. Does he get together with Sean Elliott and Mike Furrey, and it's a three-man mapping out of the offense? Does he have them in his office and they explain what they're going to do, and he goes, all right, guys, this is your baby for 3 games, hopefully 4. Go do what you want to do. Does he look at one of them and be like, this is an open tryout? I went to say out loud that he would be interfering with the offense, but on second thought, for all I know, he's sitting there and going, what are y'all going to do? And they explain what they're going to do, which if you go by Sean Elliott, it's going to be more of a zone read type option attack out of the shotgun that's going to spread them out. Don't know what Mike Furrey would do, but how they mesh those two things together, and does Shane Beamer just go, okay, sounds good. I like it. Let's go with it.
I think all those are possibilities, and I don't know if we're going to get specific answers on that, because I guess we won't hear from him until next Tuesday when he starts previewing Texas
Sunday.
A&M.
Well, I think we'll hear. I think we have a teleconference.
Do we have a teleconference Sunday? I don't know if they do that on the bye week or not. Maybe they do.
And then because Thursday night is Dawn.
Yeah, Thursday night's somebody for basketball in Carolina calls. But regardless, it'll be next week before we actually hear from him, and before he, and again, it's Big Spur that's reporting the Elliott and Furrey combination at OC. It'll be then before we get an actual confirmation from him. That's the direction they're going. But yeah, I think all those things are certainly plausible, and from a fan standpoint, you really don't care how you get there. You just hope that it's something that is better than what you've had. Now, again, that's the risk that you're taking by firing Shula and handing play calling duties over to 2 guys that really haven't been in that position at this level of football before, to see if they can kind of work it through for these final 3 games and piece something together. But again, when it was as bad as it was, you take that kind of risk and hope for the best.
So how did we get here through 10 games? And obviously 9 this season. Bowl game against Illinois counts as 10 in the bowl game. Now we all look at the bowl game and are like,
It's a warning sign.
Yeah.
Which, funny enough, the bowl game was actually their highest yardage output of the entire Shula era with 390 yards. The only time they ever eclipsed 350.
So, yeah, now we all look back at the bowl game and we're like, okay, so that wasn't like just something uncoordinated. That was who you are. And as you just said, and that was without Rocket Sanders. So, all right, you kind of get that there. I said it the other day, and I just said, I asked, quite frankly, we held the defense to a low standard because there was 5 dudes drafted. There was 5 guys drafted. There wasn't a guy drafted from offense.
Nope.
But you did lose 5 integral pieces. You lost potentially the best tight end in the league. Well, if he didn't get drafted, I guess I can't say that. But you lost Josh Simon.
Good tight end.
Who was a very good tight end. You lost one of, even though he didn't get drafted, but he didn't get drafted more for injury reasons, Rocket Sanders.
Yep.
Which was, we don't understand how big of a loss that was.
The best back you've had here in a while.
And you lost, which, if you look at it now, and Lord knows if you watched him play, you lost your 3 interior linemen, which appeared to be staples of your offensive line. It looks like they also protected Josiah Thompson at tackle, who this year has been not very good, to put it nicely. So you lost some integral pieces there. And quite frankly, if you want to build out just a little bit, even though he was constantly injured, but he made some big catches, Delvon Campbell as well. But I don't think you can. I don't think
he was good for 1 big catch a game.
I don't think he works for my analogy here. But I wonder again, did we simply because of the Lenora Sellers hype? And I get it. You know how people are. People are going to be like, it's Wes and Chris's fault too, and JC and Hales, because look at what they put on the message boards. Look at how they hype the offense. Look at their sources telling us how great the offense is ahead of the defense in the fall. I get that, okay, but can't blame them. But did we expect a little bit too much because of one singular dude?
Maybe. And look, let's go back to why this hire was made, because it made total sense at the time. You had because by all accounts, Dal Loggins would have been back here as OC for a 3rd straight year if he did not take the App State job or a different job. So when he moves on and takes, again, a step up from his career standpoint to go coach at Appalachian State, it made all the sense in the world that you hire the guy, and Wes brought this up yesterday when we were talking, and he wrote about it in Gamecock Central. You know, when the offense started to take off last year, there was that rumor within the fan base, well, actually, it's Mike Shula doing this and that. He's calling the plays. He's doing this. He's the reason the offense is taking off, not Dow Loggins, and not that that was true or not, but still, when Dow Loggins moves on, you just take the guy that quite literally sat next to Lenore Sellers after every drive and was a part of that development process for him that helped him become the player that he was towards the end of last year. Say, okay, well, this guy's going to call the plays. Again, he's got the track record, former head coach, called plays in the NFL. Cam Newton's MVP season 2015, like all those things that we talked about made total sense. And as opposed to if you brought somebody in from the outside, be like, okay, well, is this guy going to mesh with Lenore Sellers? How's that going to work? What's that relationship going to be like? Is he going to be learning a new offense? And that was another thing, too, is you didn't want Lenore Sellers being in a situation where he had to learn a different offense in his second year as a starter. By all accounts, you were just carrying over the same thing from last year. So on paper, the decision that they made total sense. It's the execution. And yes, this falls on the players as well, as we saw on Saturday. The execution from a play calling standpoint and a player standpoint didn't do what it needed to do.
The surprising thing that falls, I think, at the feet of Mike Shula, I think, is the lack of development. That's shocking, is that Lenore Sellers, and I said this a few weeks ago, I'm pretty sure you were here. I think you've only missed one day. You were out. But it's honestly like none of the players, it's honestly like none of the players spent the offseason trying to get better. I know that's not true. I don't think it's true. But you look at Sellers, he's the exact same.
Mm-hmm.
You look at, now Nick Harbor's better.
Nick Harbor's better. Sure. Is that the only one on offense we can confidently say that about? It might be.
You wouldn't have said Kason Henry was better, would you?
No.
He might be.
I mean, he was your, out of the group, the best performing O-lineman, which that's not saying a whole lot. He was doing fine, but I didn't look at him and say, wow, this guy's just a superstar compared to last year.
Mazio Bennett has been.
Well, I mean, but Brian Rowe passed him by.
Yeah. Brady Hunt is, I guess, slightly better.
He's made some catches.
Josiah Thompson.
No,
I don't know
definitely
what
not.
he did in the offseason. And that's my point. Like, and not all of that is on Mike Shula, but I can't help but wonder, like, what happened with development through 9 months? And I think that's, before you even get to play calling, you go, what occurred there? Because Lenore Sellers just simply throwing the football like on Saturday night doesn't look good.
It was awful. It was his worst game as a game.
Footwork, everything looks bad.
Everything. Again, he was missing a wide. It's not, and he was pressured a lot, but even situations where he wasn't, he was just missing guys completely wide open. And yeah, he had some bad throws last year, but not at that high of a clip in one game. And you can make the argument, okay, well, Shula maybe from just focusing on developing a quarterback is good. When he has to do that and call plays, not good. Like, maybe that's too much for him. I don't know, but it wasn't working, which is why 10 games in, you had to make a change.
803-404-6100. We'll continue down this path and talk a little bit more. If you want to weigh in, again, 803-404-6100. You're listening to The Halftime Show. Bill Gunner for the Mortgage Guru, Jacob Crowder, and First Palmetto Bank. Here we are in November, and kind of in the housing market, you tend to look ahead. You tend to start thinking about the future, and with you and your home, maybe you're already doing that. You're thinking about 2026. You're thinking about maybe refinancing your home. You've seen some of the news on these interest rates, and you're thinking it might be a good idea. Maybe you're looking to upgrade your home, need something a little bit bigger, or you're looking to downsize. The kids are moving out. The first phone call you have to make is to Jacob Crowder, the Mortgage Guru. See what loan of options are available. See how much money you might have to put down or how much you have to spend. That's the first step you got to make, and you can make that phone call today and get those numbers. 803-719-1005. Again, that's 803-719-1005. Call the Mortgage Guru, Jacob Crowder, today. Tell him Bill Gunner sent you. 12:33 on a Tuesday. Again, normally we'd be gearing up for Shane Beamer. We will not hear from him today, but let's hear from him Sunday afternoon, or about 5 o'clock Sunday. This is on his teleconference. This is after the decision to fire Mike Shula. Here is Shane Beamer, if you haven't heard it, breaking down and explaining the process of letting Mike Shula go from the South Carolina football staff.
Mike Shula is a fantastic football coach. Mike Shula is a fantastic person. His resume and all he's accomplished as a coach speaks for itself at the college level and the NFL level. I just made the decision that I made last December to promote him, and believed it was the right decision for a lot of reasons, as I spoke about at the time. And frankly, it just hasn't worked like I wanted it to work. We all have a hand in it, players and coaches. We all have to be better, but just did not like the way we were performing offensively through now 10 games, and felt like going forward short term and long term, this was a decision that I needed to make for the betterment of our program. I know no one wants to hear it. We're not far off. We have been in the fourth quarter of games against multiple teams this year that are college football playoff contenders, and we're right there. And I expect to have this team back in the mix for a college football playoff berth, just like we were last season. And I expect to have this team in that mix soon. It obviously won't be in 2025, but in order for us to get where we want to go, we need to elevate and take another step from an offensive standpoint. It's not just about this season. We haven't been consistent enough from an offensive standpoint the last few years, and there's another level of play that we can get to offensively.
So you hear all that, and they're words, and they're nothing more than words right now, aside from the part where Mike Shula is no longer involved with the football team. But they're words, and they have to be backed up by action. And that becomes the million-dollar question, is what is going to be the action, Tyler? What is going to be the action? And we think we know. I know people want to throw names out, and I see Kendall Briles, and I see these other names. I don't know what the answer. I don't have the name for anybody right now to be like, that's the surefire guy, because, Tyler, you kind of mentioned it. There's no goof-ups here.
No, you have to get this right. Your job is on the line. If you don't get this right, again, what you did last year, 9-3, got your extension, that bought you time. So regardless of how bad this year ends up being, you're likely not getting fired. If you want to go take another job, that's a different story. I don't think that's going to happen, but you're the coach for 2026 if you want to be, is essentially the situation here. But if we're sitting here November 4th of 2026 and you're sitting at 3-6, your offense is in the hundreds in every statistical category, your job's next, and you may not even make it to the end of that season. You know what I mean? Like, you have to get this right.
This is going to become the harder part of the question. I think offensive line is fine with Sean Elliott. You give him time.
Yeah.
So you, in my opinion, in Bill Gunner's opinion, don't want to speak for Tyler, don't want to speak for anybody else, you just find the offensive coordinator that can mesh with Sean Elliott. That's not ideal, but that's kind of the process of doing it. And by the way, underrated part of this, whomever you hire can't just be an OC. You've got to have kind of a proven quarterback record. Dow Loggins had a proven quarterback coaching record. You say what you wanted about his play calling,
sure,
and all that. Dow Loggins was a proven quarterback developing coach.
Yeah, because you're either going to have Lenore Sellers coming back for a third year. I'd lean toward probably not going to happen, but it still could. And again, you're going to need to undo whatever the heck Mike Shula did to him in the offseason, or unless you go out there and get somebody in the transfer portal, you're going to be starting a Cutter Woods, an Aaron Noland, or a Landon Duckworth that has never, none of those guys have started a college football game before. I can count on one hand how many passes Cutter Woods has thrown in his, college football career to this point. So you're right. You would need somebody that can come in and take the reins of the quarterback position and develop it to the point of where it's better than it is right now. Again, there was reason why we went along with the hype of Sellers this offseason. It wasn't just us. It's not like we were just hyping it up within this bubble. We've known for a while what Sellers' capability and talent was going back to his high school days at South Florence, and the few little flashes we saw back in that 2023 season where he came in garbage time basically against teams like Furman and Vanderbilt and stuff like that. But he lived up to it, particularly in the second half of last year, and that's why he was being, paraded around as a Heisman favorite and first-round pick and all that kind of stuff because of the results on the field. And it was natural to assume, okay, well, that means in year number 2, he's only going to get even better. And we just haven't seen that. We've seen, like, bits and pieces, right? You've seen, okay, well, his ability to run the football against Kentucky, well, that looked pretty good. When he threw the ball against Missouri, that looked like old Sellers, but it just has not been able to come together for one whole game in all aspects. And then you look back at this past weekend, and in every facet, pretty much, it was his worst game as a Gamecock. The running wasn't god-awful, but the throwing was. And the throwing is enough to outweigh whatever you were doing on the ground with your rushing touchdown and all those kind of things. And I don't want to say that he's broken, because I don't think it's a situation where he can never get back to being the guy that he was. But, again, whoever you hire as the offensive coordinator, there's a big if, because I don't think it's going to happen, if Sellers were to come back, you have to spend the entire offseason undoing whatever it was in the development process that caused all these issues that Sellers has had. So that in and of itself would be a task. Or the other option, as I mentioned a moment ago, you're going to have to be likely taking in a quarterback that's never started a game before in Duckworth, Air Noland, or Cutter Woods, and trying to make that work. And I go back to the attractiveness of this job, right? And this is something we talked about with Chris Lowe of On3 earlier on this morning. Like, how attractive is this South Carolina offensive coordinator job? Because you got to think about it. There are tons and tons of positions open across college football from a head coach standpoint as well as assistants. So whoever gets hired as the Auburn coach, well, guess what? They're going to need an offensive coordinator. Whoever gets hired as the LSU coach or the Florida coach or the Penn State coach, UCLA, all these jobs, the ones that likely are going to come up in Wisconsin, Florida State, all those teams are going to be competing with you when it comes to hiring offensive coordinators. And whether that be you're hiring a coordinator that's somebody that's at a G5 level right now as a coordinator, somebody that's a current head coach somewhere at the G5 level, somebody that's a current FBS coach, a Power 4 coach that's just sick of being a coach and wants to go call plays, because we've seen that happen in the past handful of years. Look at Chip Kelly. He said, you know what? I don't want to coach. I don't want to be a head coach anymore. I'm going to go call ball plays. And he went to Ohio State and won a national championship. Those kind of things can happen too. But you have to ask the question of how attractive are you compared to these other jobs? Now, money plays a big factor in that. And, you look at the higher paid assistants in college football, you're going to have to shell out in the $2 million range on an annual basis if you're going to get an assistant of that high of quality. I don't know if you are or not. And this goes back to Jeremiah Donati and the budget within the football program and all that kind of stuff on what you can spend. Now, I would hope, and again, this is real money, so the dollars and cents have to come from somewhere. I would hope that Coach Beamer has the ability to go out there and spend what he wants to on an offensive coordinator, so you can guarantee, or to the best degree, that you're getting the best guy for the job that's going to be able to come in here and do what you need him to do. Lead this offense back to some kind of place of consistency, because that's the thing, right? We look at the defense of this team, special teams for the most part. They didn't have their best day on Saturday, but if you took this team's defense and special teams and gave them just an average offense, again, I talk about, and I've brought it up, all the statistical categories that Carolina is like in the 120s or 130s in out of 136 teams in the FBS. If you gave South Carolina an offense that was just perfectly average, 68th in the nation in every statistical category, they could, instead of being 3-6, I don't know, maybe you're like a 6-3, and maybe that's being too generous, maybe a 5-4, but you're in a better spot than you are as of right now, because the other two facets of the game throughout the season have done enough to allow you to be in these games. It's the offense that hasn't been able to capitalize, and unfortunately when the offense is just sputtering late in the game, your defense ends up falling apart because they're exhausted being on the field and having to defend so many plays and all that kind of stuff. So it all goes back to the offense at the end of the day, which is why this hire is so dang important for Shane Beamer to get right. And again, we're not going to learn who it is in the next handful of weeks. It'll be after the season ends, as those hires typically happen. but you bought yourself time to really dive in and think about it. Talk to people, create those channels of communication, all that kind of stuff, because you got to knock this out of the park. This has to be the best coordinator hire you've ever had by a long shot to get this thing back on track. And I don't doubt that you can, but you have to go out there and do it. And again, if things continue to go sideways, then we're talking about Coach Beamer and his future this time next year. Not there. Again, he's bought himself good grace with the season a year ago, and the job is still safe. But if you can't get this hire right, then that narrative does begin to flip and change, which I hope we avoid. I like Beamer. I think he's a good guy. He loves being here, and I believe him when he says, hey, this is my dream job, and this is where I want to be. But you got to make this hire right to continue to have that progress. We'll come back and wrap up the hour at halftime show. Tyler Head, Bill Gunner, Captain Dave on your Tuesday on the Game. Well, welcome back in. It is the halftime show. Tyler Head, wrapping up hour number 1 here on your Tuesday on the game. Again, the men's basketball team in action tonight taking on North Carolina A&T. Tip-off at 7 o'clock, pregame coverage starting with Derek Scott and Judge Manning at 6:30 right here on the game. Simultaneously at 7 o'clock, you'll also get the first rankings reveal of the college football playoff top 25 for setting the field for this year's playoff. They put out the video yesterday of all the people going into the room in Grapevine, Texas, taking their hats off, which I guess was the signal of leaving your allegiances at the door and having real unbiased conversations, which I don't believe will ever happen. There's always going to be bias built in to something like a committee poll like this. But I'm interested to see where it goes and what it looks like coming away from tonight. I have a sneaking suspicion it's probably going to end up looking a lot like the AP poll, at least in the top 10, from what we had over the weekend. And the AP poll does influence the college football playoff to some degree, but I'm really interested to see how this new criteria, right, where the playoff committee came out before the season and said, hey, we're putting more incentive and more focus on who you beat, how you beat them, who you lost to, how'd you lose to them, those kind of things where quality wins and quality losses can truly raise and lower where teams at in these things, which I kind of thought is what they were doing all along, but I guess not. But at least they're now finally acknowledging it. And I'll say this, watching the AP poll this year, and again, I'm somebody that, I don't care what the AP poll says, because at the end of the day, it's not how we're deciding playoffs or champions or anything like that. But again, I do understand it has an influence. And I will say I've been pretty surprised in a good way with the way the AP poll has done things this year in terms of rapid movement, right? And there's always this perception, because we've done it for so long with the AP and the BCS, that you can only move so far up and down one week to the next because, well, you can't jump over those teams. Well, why can't you? If you have a win that's so impressive, it skyrockets you up 8 to 10 spots, what's wrong with that? And if you have a loss that's bad enough, why can't you drop 10 or 11 spots? And we've seen that pretty radically. What Penn State, they were still in the top 10, I think. Them and Texas, I think we're still in the top 10, maybe like 7 or 8, when they lost their respective games to UCLA and Florida. And they both fell out of the top 25. That was very much an unprecedented thing, but I think that kind of falls in line with the way the new playoff committee criteria is going to look at those kind of games, where you can have losses so egregiously bad, you can just fall off the face of the earth as far as the committee's concerned. And you can have losses so significantly good, you can rise up pretty quickly. So I'm interested to see how they apply that set criteria to coming up with their top 25, not just this week, because this week just kind of sets the bar. It's the next couple of weeks of going up, down, and all that kind of stuff in terms of how we're going to shake things out for the 12-team college football playoff coming up here in a little over a month's time. And I think, let me check the schedule here, because I think the conference championships, they won't be played until a little bit later in December. So Selection Sunday won't be until December the 7th, which we'll learn who the 12 teams are for the college football playoff. And my God, for how wide open this season has been so far up to this point, there's no telling what's going to be happening over the course of this next month. You're going to have a lot of playoff elimination games over the course of the next 4 weeks of the regular season, which, I was somebody, I didn't really have a problem with 14 playoff. I thought it, much like the BCS, rewarded being perfect or darn near perfect in terms of having to be undefeated or only having one loss. And the 12-team playoff did open that up to more teams with more losses getting in. But dang, if it didn't make for a lot of compelling matchups in the month of November, which is the fun thing about it. I mean, this past weekend, for all intents and purposes, I think we watched an elimination game between Oklahoma and Tennessee, because I think we all kind of feel that if you have that third loss in conference play in the SEC, that's probably not enough to get you in, which for Tennessee, that's the case. They don't have really a ton of huge wins to fall back on at this point in time. So you're going to see a lot of those games happening over the course of the next month, trying to set the field for the second edition, maybe the last edition of the 12-team playoff. Don't forget, and I think it's December 1st when they have the deadline, they do have the option to expand this out to 16 teams next year, which I'm thinking that they probably will. They haven't officially confirmed it yet, but that's something that's on the table. So maybe we get this expanded out even more coming up in 2026. But for the time being, we still have a 12-team playoff, and I'm interested to see who's number one, because I think the overwhelming majority think it's going to be Ohio State, but I think Indiana, quite frankly, as far as the undefeated teams go, and there's only 3 of them as far as Power 4 are concerned left, the Ohio State, which I guess BYU is still undefeated, so maybe not. But in terms of the teams that are at the very top in the SEC and the Big Ten, I think Indiana's got the best win of the entire year, going on the road and beating Oregon, which Oregon's still ranked in the top 10 in the AP poll, and you can make a case that they have a better win and might find themselves number 1. I think it's still going to be Ohio State, but it'll be interesting to see what the committee ultimately decides to do with that tonight. Obviously, that would end up working itself out with those 2 teams playing in the conference championship in a couple weeks anyway, but excited to see the first 12-team playoff rankings revealed. Coming up hour number 2, we'll dive into what the heck is going on the Plains with Auburn and Hugh Freeze looking for a new job and all that kind of stuff as the coaching carousel continues to spin in college football. That's all coming up here on the Halftime Show on The Game. Welcome back in, hour number 2. Tyler Head, Captain Dave along with you here on the halftime show, navigating you through a bye week. Again, we're going to continue to talk plenty about, Gamecock football, the offensive coordinator spot, kind of a reflection on the first 9 games and where this program's at as the week goes along. And we'll get back into A&M and look ahead for the final 3 games, certainly coming up next week. But this week also allows us an opportunity to expand out a little bit more, talk about things happening around college football that maybe haven't gotten as much run conversation-wise so far this year. But one thing that we've not shied away from, obviously, is revolved around this coaching carousel, which, look, I've been a fan of the sport my entire life. I am almost 30 years old. I've been covering the sport from a professional standpoint for almost a decade now, and I've never seen anything like this. Look, we've seen high-profile jobs come and go, and plenty of notable coaches get fired, big buyouts. Jimbo Fisher still holding the record as of right now, but so many big-name programs, big brands in college football are looking for head coaches this upcoming offseason. And the newest addition to that list for the 3rd week in a row is an SEC team in Auburn. And, much like with Billy Napier, when we heard him after the Mississippi State win, much like Brian Kelly when we listened to him after getting their doors blown off by A&M 2 weeks ago, Hugh Freeze kind of the same way, where they lost I'll use a Jim Ross phrase here, a bowling shoe ugly game to Kentucky on Saturday night, 10-3 in their own venue. You knew Hugh Freeze was definitely cooked after that one. And, when asked about his own future, here's what Hugh Freeze had to say on Saturday night.
Yeah, I wish I could ask for patience, but that's not really something that's that people want to give in this day and time, and I understand that. I just know that we're so dang close, and if we had a few things go our way earlier in the year, I think we're looking at a whole different deal. But it didn't, and that's life, and that's the game of football, and it teaches us a lot of great things and a lot of tough things, and we'll get up and go to work and get ready for the next one, and I know these kids will. It's hard. It stinks, and, I'd love for their patience, but I understand that you're probably not getting patience from them because they want to see a better product on the field, and so do I.
It's really funny when coaches come to the end of their tenure or when coaches are struggling mightily, there's always like one phrase, right, or one set of words that a coach says over and over again that almost become a running joke within that fan base or within greater college football. And I feel like for Hugh Freeze, we're so darn close was that. And look, I don't sit there and listen to every single Hugh Freeze press conference because I don't cover Auburn for a living. I pay attention to Auburn plenty, but I feel like every time I did see a snippet of a Hugh Freeze press conference this year, last year, all that kind of stuff, it was saying the same thing. We're so darn close, so darn close, so darn close. And at some point, if I was an Auburn fan, I'd lose my mind, wanting to put my head through the wall by saying, enough of saying we're so close. You're either going to get there or you're not. And it really didn't look like there were any signs of them getting any closer to being where they wanted to be. And let's remember this. This is an Auburn program that 15 years ago won a national championship. 12 years ago, played for another national championship. Let's go 8 years ago, played for the SEC championship against Georgia. Like, yeah, maybe they don't have the highest track record of success overall compared to some other programs, but in recent years, they had the undefeated season back in 2004 where they got snubbed from the national championship. Like, in this, millennium, Auburn football is thought of as a pretty good program, and Hugh Freeze has not gotten them anywhere close to where they want to be. And I'll admit this myself. When Hugh Freeze got hired away from Liberty to come to Auburn, I thought he was the perfect guy for the job. And it made it look even better when you stack it up compared to the god-awful hire they made in Brian Harsin, which from day one, I think most of us saw that wasn't going to work. And the way it all fell apart was just a disaster class and how not to have a coaching tenure. But they move on from him, pay him a boatload of money to go away, and they hire Hugh Freeze. Again, Hugh Freeze had success at Auburn. Hugh Freeze had famously beaten Nick Saban in 2 consecutive years, 2014 and 2015. And that was really the thing that people brought up first when it came to talking about him. But he's somebody that also got a lot out of quarterbacks, right? I mean, think about Bo Wallace, Chad Kelly. Was Jordan Teamu his quarterback? I can't remember. Maybe I have my timeline messed up on that. But he got more out of quarterbacks than maybe a lot of other coaches should. And that's kind of where his rapport as an offensive genius, quarterback whisperer, and all that kind of stuff came from. Now, again, he had his issues at Ole Miss with the burner phones and all that kind of stuff and escorts and all those kind of things that led to his ultimate dismissal. And like every coach, he ends up going to a smaller school and trying to rehabilitate himself both personally and professionally to where he can get back to the higher ranks of college football. That's exactly what he did. He goes to Liberty. They have success, and, Auburn comes knocking. Say, okay, well, we moved on from this Harsin guy. You want to come in here and fix this? And with any coach, even in today's age, I give you a pass for your number one, right? That in and of itself is a mulligan of a season. And the fact that he went 6-7, I think probably exceeded a lot of people's expectation, much like Beamer here when he went 7-6 in his first year and won the Mayo Bowl. So it's like, okay, you're actually a little more ahead of schedule than we thought. The problem is his insistence on sticking with quarterbacks that haven't panned out. Now, he brought in Peyton Thorne in that first year back in 2023. Wasn't great, and Peyton Thorne was a solid quarterback when he was at Michigan State, but it seemed like he regressed when he got to Auburn. And instead of going out and getting somebody different before the 2024 season, he stuck to his guns in Peyton Thorne, and it didn't work out. Now, coming into this year, they made a splashy get in the transfer portal in Jackson Arnold. They got the lesser-known Ashton Daniels from Stanford. They had Deuce Knight coming in as, a 5-star quarterback. So, okay, somebody in this room is going to emerge. The quarterback position is going to be figured out some kind of way with one of these three guys, and it wasn't. And I think Saturday night against Kentucky, and, they were playing at the same time that South Carolina was, so you probably weren't getting to see too much of this game. But in case you didn't see it, they kept flip-flopping quarterbacks every other drive, it seemed like. Ashton Daniels got the start because the prior game, I can't remember who they played, the prior game, they finally benched Jackson Arnold. When they lost Arkansas, or they played Arkansas, they benched Jackson Arnold. Ashton Daniels comes in and leads them to a victory. So naturally, he gets the start. But they kept flip-flopping back and forth. Ashton Daniels, Jackson Arnold, Ashton Daniels, Jackson Arnold. And it's a classic case of if you have two quarterbacks, you don't have one. Because they couldn't figure out who they wanted to go with. I'm surprised Deuce Knight didn't get out there at some point, which I guess that's an indictment on Deuce Knight not being where he needs to be to play at this level of football. But it was just a mess, right? And they couldn't do anything on offense. They generated under 250 total yards against Kentucky. Let me say that again. They generated under 250 yards of offense against Kentucky. That in and of itself is a fireable offense. Funny enough, they did generate more offense than Kentucky did, 241 yards, 240, and they still lost the game. They had a measly field goal, 3 points against Kentucky's defense that even South Carolina, as bad as their offense is, scored 3 touchdowns against them. So that was the last straw. And much like Brian Kelly a couple weeks ago at LSU, as Hugh Freeze is walking off the field and the boos are raining down, the fire freeze chants are echoing and all that kind of stuff, you knew that was the end. You knew there is no coming back from this. This is rock bottom, and he's got to go. And so they're going to pay him a bunch of money, just like they paid Gus Malzahn, just like they played Brian Harsin. Now they're going to pay to Hugh Freeze to try and get themselves back on track. And unfortunately, as we kind of say with all these other jobs, get in line. Because now you're just on a list of high-profile programs looking for their next head coach. If this was any other year, and let's say, out of the Big Ten and the SEC, the only 2 jobs open were UCLA and Auburn. There is no doubt Auburn would be looked at as the best job in college football available at that point in time, and they would get their pick of the litter of whatever coach wanted to come there and take over. Maybe they get Lane Kiffin. Maybe they get somebody else. I don't know, but you would be the focal point. But now it's like, okay, well, LSU's probably still the better job, or is it, depending on, how the situation with the governor and lack of president and all that kind of stuff is going. Florida, I'd say probably right there on par with Auburn in terms of how you compare those two and the expectations and all that kind of stuff. But my point is, not to mention Penn State, Florida State's likely going to come up in Wisconsin. All these jobs, they're going to be available. You don't know who you're going to get. And that's the interesting thing about this coaching cycle is there's going to be several massive programs in college football. They're going to have to settle for coaches, right? You never want to settle when it comes to making a coaching hire because typically those kind of things don't end up working out. Sometimes they do, but most of the time they don't, because you have an idea in your head of we want to hire Coach A, and then you're like, well, Coach A doesn't want to come here, or Coach A got a contract extension, or somebody else hired Coach A before we could. Then you get down to like Coach G, and it's like, okay, well, I guess we'll hire this guy because he said he wants to come. And that's how you end up having to fire him and hire somebody else a couple years later. Like, I'm so fascinated, right, to see how this plays out over the course of the rest of this cycle. Because, again, there's more jobs to open. There's a lot more jobs to open. I don't know what's going to happen. And for a program like Auburn that, again, has a rabid fan base that demands excellence every time, they have a season, who's going to take that job? Who's going to want to take that job? Who's going to want to go into that buzzsaw of expectations and try and live up to it? I truly do not know. They got money. I think they got money, and they'll throw it at somebody. But I don't think Hugh Freeze is leaving Ole Miss. And again, he was rumored for that job a couple years ago when when Hugh Freeze took it. So I don't think he's going to go there this time. But we'll see. It's been an interesting coaching cycle. That's certainly for sure. Continue to talk about this as well as talk more Gamecock football and again, kind of where we're at right now, sitting at 3-6 on the year as we're on a bye week. As the halftime show rolls alongside Captain Dave on your Tuesday on the Game. All right, welcome back in. It is the halftime show. Tyler Head, Captain Dave, along with you here on your Tuesday on the Game. Earlier on this morning, we had Chris Lowe of On3 join us on the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, and we were talking about exactly what I talked about in the last segment there. The coaching carousel being wide open in college football, and Chris gave his insight and what he knows a little bit earlier on today. Here's what he had to say. All right, welcome back in. It is the Garnet Trust Hour presented by Krantz Cooling and Heating. Tyler Head, Jack Belcher, and Chris Clark along with you here on your Tuesday on the Game, taking a spin around the world of college football in this chaotic year of 2025. Nobody better to give us some insight than veteran reporter working for On3, Chris Lowe, who's joining us now on the AAA Heating and Air phone lines. Chris, appreciate you taking your time. How are we doing today, man?
I'm doing great. It's good to be with you guys.
Well, thanks for being with us, and you couldn't have come in at a better time. We were just talking about the Hugh Freeze firing in the last segment there. A fourth of the jobs open in the SEC. Tons of high-profile jobs across the nation that are looking for coaches this upcoming offseason. Who the heck's going to fill all these jobs? Is there enough coaches to fill these jobs?
Yeah, and there may be more, too. There may be more coming. In fact, I would predict that there will be more firings as we get into the last part of November. I think there's certainly a chance we may see a change at FSU, Kentucky, maybe Wisconsin. So I would say my advice to fans is to strap it in pretty good, man, because I don't think we've seen the last of the carnage. To your question, I think that's what a lot of people, coaches, administrators are asking. Well, are there enough guys who are qualified who you can point to and say this person is definitely ready to be a head coach? I do think there's a really good crop of G5 coaches out there. Alex Golich certainly at USF, Ryan Silverfield at Memphis, John Sumrall, who I think will be heavily involved in the Auburn search at Tulane. And I also like some of the coordinators are out there. I was in Columbus last weekend for the Penn State-Ohio State game, and Brian Hartline is going to get a job, the Buckeyes OC. He's been pretty picky to this point. He's been there for about a decade. And I would not be surprised to see him involved at Penn State, depending on what happens with guys like Clark Lee and Vanderbilt, which if that were to happen, that creates another job opening in the SEC. And then I think when you look around at other coordinators, Colin Klein at Texas A&M, their OC, I got to think he's going to get a job somewhere in Will Stein in Oregon. You know, to me, it's no coincidence that when you look around college football now, everybody wants a sitting head coach, fans, ADs. Well, who are some of the most successful guys right now? Kirby Smart was a coordinator. Marcus Freeman was a coordinator. Dan Lanning was a coordinator. So I don't think that's if you got somebody like that you know is up and coming, even though he hasn't been a head coach, I just don't think it should be a deal breaker.
Chris, this is Chris. Thanks for taking time to join us again. I know you got a lot going on. Let's talk about the coach who's on the radar for several of these jobs. I think most specifically Florida, and that's Lane Kiffin. Obviously, at Ole Miss, Gamecocks saw him, took a loss against his program in Oxford on Saturday. Probably hard to predict, but to put you on the spot, does he stay in Oxford? Does he go to Gainesville? Does he go to Baton Rouge? Like, what do you think happens and plays out with Lane Kiffin?
Yeah, I got to be careful because everything anybody says right now in our profession about a coach, whether you're predicting or saying he may or may not go to that fan base, whether it's Auburn, whether it's Ole Miss, they perceive it as a slight. So the way I would answer that is simply this, because I was with Lane about 2 weeks ago. I don't think Lane really knows what he's going to do right now. I also think that it's good to be Lane Kiffin right now. He's had the best stretch at Ole Miss maybe ever, certainly one of them, in the last 50 years. Ole Miss has stepped up and paid him a ton of money. He genuinely likes living there. They have invested in the program with NIL cash. There's no reason that they can't be in a 12-team format. Certainly if we get to 16 teams, a consistent participant in the playoff. That said, if you're looking at it again from sort of his perspective, you've done all these things, you've accomplished these things. you're 50 and you're at the top of the list of two of the top, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 jobs in America, LSU and Florida. Do you kick yourself if you don't take a serious look at those? I mean, are you ever going to be in that type position again? I sort of think that's where he is. I know this. He was very clear to me. He wasn't happy with himself the way it all went down with Auburn last time. It was a distraction for him, for his team, and that team bottomed out toward the end of the season. This is an Ole Miss team that has a chance to be a playoff team. And I understand that the next question for fans is, well, is there any way that you can make that work if your team's in the playoff and you win a game and still be in consideration for a job elsewhere with the portal timeline, the signing day? Yeah, I think there is. If you're the guy and it's a job in Lane's case that he thinks, would warrant that. So I don't know. I don't really have a prediction because I don't think he's made up his mind. I do think, though, he is and will be very seriously considering both of those opportunities.
Hey, Chris, it's Jack Velcher here. Appreciate you joining us. With all the coaches that have been fired in this cycle, and look, not every school that has already fired a coach is going to get who they want. But I guess my question is, how many of these currently fired head coaches do you think are coaching again next year? Is it possible that a few of them are, or what do you think with that?
Yeah, I would say Franklin's at the top of that list. He's going to get a gig. Virginia Tech is certainly one that he's had discussions with, or his reps. He'll be in it, I think, at Auburn. If Florida State were open, I think he would be in it in Tallahassee. So there's some jobs like that he will and would be involved with. So I think he was at the top of the list. To me, the X factor is Jimbo Fisher. Now, Jimbo's been out of it. This is not – he didn't just get fired. But there's so many openings out there right now. You think someone is going to take a shot on him, a guy who's won a national title, who won pretty consistently at Florida State. And in his defense, even though it ended badly at A&M, during the COVID year in 20, they had a really good football team and probably should have been in the playoff over Notre Dame that year. So, he's proven in a couple of different places that he's a good coach. So it'll be fascinating to see, if he gets a shot somewhere. And then Bobby Petrino at Arkansas. Does Arkansas keep him and sort of turn that program over to him full time? I think they're better, or they've played better since he's been the interim. They still haven't won, though. And I think he's going to have to win a game or two, before he gets that shot full time. I don't know that that's an absolute requirement, but I think it certainly would help. So, those are some names. I don't know about Hugh Freeze. We'll see. Hugh's, I think it's been well chronicled. Hugh's, dealing with cancer now. I think it's in remission now, but he plans to have the surgery in January. So I don't know what that would mean for him next year if somebody were interested. So those are some of the, the main names. And then Mike Gundy. Mike was at Oklahoma State forever. That's his school as a player, assistant, and a head coach. I think he's still got some. I think Mike still, if he gets the right situation and they invest and are willing to spend some money, I think Mike still has his fastball. And he certainly would be somebody that if I were looking to sort of rebuild a little bit and had some cash that he can really go in and build a roster, that I would be interested in.
Chris Lowe of On3 joining us here in the AAA Heating and Air phone lines. Let's bring this locally to Columbia now. Shane Beamer moving on from offensive coordinator Mike Shula on Sunday. And with all these jobs being open, guess what? That's a lot of offensive coordinators are either going to be taking jobs or going to these new positions as offensive coordinators at these other schools. Once new head coaches get hired, how attractive does the South Carolina offensive coordinator position stack up to these other jobs?
Well, it's going to be hard. I don't think it's impossible, but you fired 2 of your offensive staff guys in the season. Clearly it's been substandard for the Gamecocks on offense this year. So, if you can't finish this thing out, and I'm not saying that Carolina won't be able to do that, but if you can't, and you go into next season, then that's a critical season for Shane and the program. How many established OCs, quote unquote, are going to come in? I do think that's a hard hire. Now, that doesn't mean they won't get somebody good, or they won't get somebody that can help them get back on track offensively. but it won't be easy. You know, you've had a couple different guys calling plays, and I don't know. Again, I haven't the last 2 days. I mean, Shane hasn't said really who's going to finish out the season calling plays, has he?
Not officially, and they're on a bye, so we don't have a presser today.
Yeah. So I mean, that to me that'll be interesting to see who that is, and then what he does in the off season. Generally, when you start firing coaches on your staff, and it's not, again, this is not a given, then that means that you feel pressure, there's pressure outside that, hey, you better fix this and fix it in a hurry. There's no way, let me say this, there's no way that there should really be any consideration given to firing Shane Beamer right now. I mean, he won 9 games in the regular season. You guys have been around that program. I grew up in that state. In the last 40 years, 2 guys have won 9 games in the regular season in Carolina. Shane and a guy by the name of Steve Spurrier. So he has proven, and then a couple of years earlier, the way they were able to battle, playing 4 quarterbacks, one of them a GA coach, that he can get Carolina to a position where they're winning games. Now, to be able to sustain that over 2, 3, 4 seasons in a row, that's the hard part, and I think that's where the leadership at South Carolina needs to sit down and decide, you know, is he the guy to do that? And if not, is there anybody out there realistically that's any better qualified to do it than him? But to me, it'd be asinine to push him out after this year. Next year's a big year. That I think we all would agree that against what's going to be a hard schedule, that they need to show improvement, certainly on offense. With a new quarterback, I don't see Sellers coming back, and he hasn't had nearly the year that everybody thought he would. But, you know, I'm probably guilty of this, guys. I looked at the team, not just Carolina, but Florida, Texas, some of these other schools that had big-time quarterbacks coming back, Lagway at Florida. Probably didn't do my due diligence and looked at who they had around them. And maybe we all were sort of mesmerized by the way Lenore's finished last season. You know, they just weren't great around him this year on offense, and that showed up.
Chris, appreciate the insight. Good stuff as always, and we'll probably be talking to you again down the line.
Okay, guys. Thanks for having me on. You guys have a great week.
Absolutely. You too. Again, Chris Lowe there of On3 joining us on the AAA Heating and Air phone lines. We'll come back, talk about the college football playoff top 25 ranking set to release for the first time tonight. Coming up next here on the Garnet Trust Tower, presented by Krantz Cooling and Heating on The Game. All right, welcome back in. Halftime show. Tyler, Captain Dave along with you here on your Tuesday on the game. Yesterday, we talked plenty about, obviously, the conversation around Mike Shula and being let go as offensive coordinator. We talked about that with Jamie Radford as well yesterday. Here's a little bit of our conversation with him, starting off of where he wanted to go with talking about Saturday night's loss, 30-14 to Ole Miss.
Well, I think that they tie in. I mean, it's probably a lot easier to talk about the future of the offense and the dismissal of Mike Shula.
Go ahead. Let's start with that. Your thoughts, 9 games in, decision made early yesterday. I don't care if it occurred after the game Saturday night or yesterday morning. It also doesn't matter. It's over with and done with. And we'll have plenty of time to break it down with who names are and everything like that moving forward. I know J.C. Sherbert has said that Mike Furry and Sean Elliott will collaborate together on this. So your thoughts on what it does, the energy it changes, maybe minor changes that we see?
Well, I mean, it's obviously if you're Shane, so there's two different sides of this coin. There's our side of the coin, which is media, fans, whoever, everybody else that doesn't involve the football team. And then there's the football team side, and that's what Shane Beamer has to be focused on. And that's the side of the coin that clearly he is focused on. You are trying to figure out what is best for your football team to finish the year strong. Now, it seems like a not only a daunting task, but a very unrealistic task to go into College Station and win that ball game. But that can't be your message internally, clearly. From the outside looking at it, everybody else is saying, hey, look, don't lose to Coastal Carolina and find a way to beat Clemson. And if you do that, the year is certainly nowhere near what you wanted it to be. 1-7 in the SEC is terrible, awful. You were expected to contend for the playoffs. You're not even going to the postseason. All that sucks. But you did beat your rival for the third time in 4 years, and let's get this thing fixed in the offseason and let's move on, right? So you had that was inevitable. I mean, I don't know about the timing. I mean, going into an off week seems like good timing to me. Why was it not done earlier? I'm not even going to speculate on that. I'm not Shane Beamer, and I don't run that football program, so I don't know. I have no idea. But it had to happen. It did happen. I think that you are probably going to have some energy in there that maybe they can go do something different. How much can be changed in less than 14 days? I have no idea. And then you're going to have to go out and find the best daggum offensive coordinator, no matter how much money it costs in the off season, and that will probably dictate how long Shane Beamer is going to do at South Carolina.
Obviously, we saw right away in the bowl game last year that the Shula offense was a little different, and Sellers wasn't being used in quite the same way as he was under Dow Loggins. And there's obviously an understandable period of time where you have to wait and let things progress and hopefully get better. At what point this year, for you, Jamie, did you know, hey, this offense is what it is. It's not going to get magically better, and this guy is probably not cut out for this?
Week 2. Against South Carolina State. Obviously, you saw some things in the Virginia Tech game that were concerning, but it was week 1. And then week 2, a lot of it was excused because it was played late after a rain delay and this, that, and the other. It didn't look good. It just didn't look good, man. Like, if we're being honest with ourselves, and I think that even more so when they played against Kentucky, and, that was like, week 4, game 5, and they're playing against Kentucky, and you're like, dude, Kentucky can't stop it through the air, and what are they doing out there? I mean, they threw the football like 15 times in the game or something like that. I mean, it just wasn't good. Like, they weren't attacking weaknesses. It looked like they were trying to be stubborn and doing the things that they felt like they can do, but they couldn't do them, but they wanted to continue to try to do them. And even in that win, again, obviously the defense is what propelled that thing. That was like, this is just not good. This is just not good. Of course, then you had the Alabama game where you saw some different things, and you thought, well, if they continue to build on that. And then it looked like this past weekend against Ole Miss that any time that, all the chips were in the middle of the table, or backs up against the wall, It was comfort zone again. Well, I feel comfortable calling this. And I'm not like, this is nothing personal against Mike Shula. That's just who he is. That's who he is as an offensive coordinator. I mean, that's what he knows. And it wasn't going to work. It didn't work, and it wasn't going to work. And now Lenore Sellers and this offense are going to have their third different offensive coordinator in 12 games when they kick off against Texas A&M next week. I mean, if you go back to the Clemson game and you count it forward, that'd be 3 different people calling plays in 12 games at South Carolina. So what does that signify? Is that, hey, we're in a chaotic situation here. We don't know what to do. We're trying to change everything. I don't know what it signifies, but I certainly know that it doesn't look stable. So they're going to have to get it figured out, and they're going to have to probably condense this thing to what are the things that we do the best, and they're going to have to just run that stuff over and over and over and over again and hope that your best players can make big plays.
About 2 minutes left, and there's so much I want to get to you, get with you. But let me leave you with this. We don't know the answer to this. It's purely speculative. I'm putting you on the spot here. A lot of the discussion is that Shane Beamer's got to change his offensive philosophy, get rid of this pro-style mindset that he has. You got to go to more of a college-run system. Does that happen in you mentioned it, this is to save his job. He's going to get the opportunity. He's going to most likely, unless something crazy happens, be retained as the head coach. He gets the opportunity to fix it. In Jamie Bradford's opinion, does he stick with a pro-style coordinator, or does he look for a more college-esque, spread them out, spread the field kind of guy?
No, I think he makes a change, and I know that's hard for a lot of people to believe me when I say that, and I understand that. I get it. I get why people are concerned about that. I do think Shane's a smart guy, guys. You know, he's watched this for 5 years. He knows what ain't working. And he knows that his job's on the line and the jobs of a lot of other guys. I think that they hopefully go find a young guy whose system is as you alluded to, a college system that allows you to do more with less. You've got to find a guy in a system that allows you to do more with less. Where do they go? I don't know, but more with less is so crucial at South Carolina.
Jamie, we always appreciate it. I really wanted to get to you a quote from last night and see if I'm going to read this quote and see. We're not going to have much time left, so you can use this for your show or whatever. But this is last night on the teleconference. We don't have the audio. Shane Beamer said, I know no one wants to hear it. We're not far off. We've been in the fourth quarter of games against multiple teams this year that are college football playoff contenders, and we're right there. I put out a tweet on Saturday night. It was the fourth time South Carolina's gone to the fourth quarter. Missouri, Bama, LSU, and now Saturday night, either a score down, touchdown or less, or up. I agree with him, and I'm going to have to explain that more, and I'm unfortunately giving you about 1 minute and 10 seconds. Yes or no on that?
I wholeheartedly agree with him. It can change so fast in college football. You can go from bad to good and good to bad in the snap of a finger now. I don't disagree with Shane at all. I think he's exactly right. And that message, by the way, that message is to everybody else. Anybody that's interested in being an OC or interested in playing football at South Carolina, that's what that message is intended for. Pay attention to us. If you can fix it, we want to hear from you. If you could be a part of fixing it, we want to hear from you. We're not down in the dumps around here. We're very close. It ain't going to take much to get us back to where we were last year, which is pretty darn close to being in the college football playoffs. I think it's the right message. It's the only message that you can send. You don't want to wave the flag and say this is a dumpster fire. You want somebody out there who's really good at what they do to believe that they could be the solution here. So I think it's a great message from Shane Beamer.
I think that's an interesting point that Jamie Bradford made yesterday again when talking to us here on the Halftime Show. I want to expand on that a little bit as we come back and wrap up the hour. It is the Halftime Show. Tyler Day, Captain Dave, along with you here on your Tuesday on The Game. All right, welcome back in. It is the halftime show. Tyler Head, Captain Dave, along with you here on your Tuesday on the Game. You just heard over the course of this hour 2 conversations, one with Chris Lowe of On3 from earlier on this morning, and then one that we had with Jamie Bradford yesterday. And both those conversations obviously went down the path of Mike Shula and the now vacant offensive coordinator job for South Carolina. And I thought both Chris and Jamie had interesting answers on there that I wanted to touch on really quick. And Jamie, as you just heard a moment ago there at the end, positioned, when Beamer talked about it on Sunday at his teleconference that, people don't like to hear this, but we're not far off, that is kind of an inviting opportunity for somebody out there to come in as an OC saying, hey, you're our missing piece. If you come in and fix this, then we can get this program back to being as successful, as they were from a year ago. And I think that's a fair point to make because, again, you saw the success that they could have in 2024, and you're not all that far removed from that. So I do think that's something that could be enticing to these candidates of guys that are, being interviewed to ultimately be the offensive coordinator. But on the flip side, I thought Chris also brought up an interesting point as well in reference to you don't want to go to a situation that you feel like is kind of in a last-ditch effort trying to figure it out, right? If you go into, Carolina thinking, well, hey, if Beamer's going to be on the hot seat going into this year, do I want to take that job? That's also a fair point. And I'm not saying that's always what guys think about in terms of taking the job. Obviously, money factors a lot, and the level of where the job is in terms of the conference and all that kind of stuff certainly factor in. That is something that Carolina has going for it in terms of the fact that you are an SEC job. I'm hopeful that they're going to be willing to pay them a good amount, especially if you want to get a high-profile guy that's going to cost you, probably north of 1.5 into maybe the $2 million range, certainly depending on, on who it's at, on who it is. But I do believe there could be a weariness to some guys saying, if this is kind of a, last-ditch effort in trying to figure out the offense, maybe I don't want to go there because then I'd be looking for another job a year later if I don't get this perfect type of thing. It's just food for thought. And as of right now, all these things do have to be considered and on the table when you're talking about trying to figure this kind of thing out. Now, again, I think the biggest factor in this is Lenore Sellers. I think Lenore Sellers is your biggest factor in all of this because if you could guarantee somebody that 16's coming back for another season, I think that becomes a lot more enticing to people, right? And saying, hey, if I can go work with Lenore Sellers, I know what he's capable of. I saw it a season ago. Oh, if it fits within my offense, obviously, I can go down there and obviously, do some special things. Now, again, getting him to commit to come back is going to be a challenge in and of itself. Again, as we talked about towards the beginning of the show, for how rough this season's been for Lenore Sellers, you look at all draft projections, and pretty much all of them have him somewhere in that late first round to early second round range, where guess what? You're going to be making a lot of money in those positions. You'd be going to a franchise, especially if you're late first round, that probably already has some kind of quarterback that's established and maybe established for the next handful of years. And for a guy like Sellers that has obviously taken seemingly a step back in his progression this year, that might actually be the best kind of situation for him, as opposed to if he went to a New York Jets or something like that as a top overall pick, where he'd be thrust into the starting role right away when maybe he's not ready for it. So that could end up working out in a weird way exactly how Sellers needs it to, which again is all that more enticing to want to go to the NFL and not come back to college football, to risk maybe tumbling further if you have another rough season, because as of right now, you can see that the stats don't matter as much. They're looking at his upside potential. They're looking at his physical ability, his physical gifts, and all that kind of stuff that people have been drooling over for the past year now, basically, and say, hey, if we get that guy in our organization, we can turn him into a superstar. And, every NFL exec's going to believe that if they're taking a hard look at Lenore Sellers, regardless of what the stats look like and all those kind of things. But, if he did come back for 2026 and has a similar type of year, then he could fall further to where it doesn't end up working out the way that he needs it to. So that's something that's certainly on the table and has to be considered. But again, I can't think of anything more enticing for a potential incoming offensive coordinator saying, hey, that guy over there is your quarterback. Build it around him and let's go to work. Like, that's something that could legitimately pull some interest for some high-level guys if, and that's if, again, I'm not guaranteeing this. In fact, I don't think it's going to happen, but if you could guarantee that Lenore Sellers was going to come back for 2026. Going to take some convincing, and maybe, internally he'll want to have a better college result before he heads off to the NFL. Those are all maybes right now, and again, we're not going to know any of this kind of stuff until the season ends. Still got 3 more games to go over the course of 4 more weeks, and then trying to figure it out from there. But just some interesting thoughts, again, from Chris Lowe and Jamie Bradford in reference to this now open job that no candidate should be off the table at this point, and hopefully they won't be. We'll come back in hour number 2. We'll touch back on some basketball stuff, what went on last night, what's going on tonight, and everything else going on around Gamecock athletics as well as college football. It's all coming up in hour number 3 here on the Halftime Show on the Game. Oh, hour number 3. Welcome back in. It is the halftime show. Tyler Head, Captain Dave, along with you here on your Tuesday on the Game. I didn't mention it at the beginning of the show, but it deserves some praise. Captain Dave, rocking some new hair. Dave, what we got going on there?
Yeah, it's a long story. Do you want to hear it?
Did you tell us about all the boxes they sent you? I can't remember.
I don't know if I said it on the air, but so you get older, your hair gets gray.
Sure.
Start losing a little bit of it.
I'm not there yet, but I understand that happens.
So I figured, I will kind of touch up that gray.
Sure, as one does.
So, I go into, there's a certain product for men.
Yes.
That's
I've heard it's just for them.
Yeah, that's what I hear as well. So I ordered some online.
Yep.
Because it was a lot cheaper than it was in the store, So I ordered a really light colored and one just a step above it because, got to try to match the hair color.
Sure.
And the box, it looks right. Everything looks correct. And I ordered, 2 boxes, right? First, it comes, and there's 4 boxes in there. And I'm like, 4? What's going on here? So I called the people who shipped it. They gave me a refund, said, it's okay. Next day, 4 more boxes. Day after that, 4 more. And then I got, I'm like, what's going on here?
Yeah.
So I call them back. They give me refunds for all of it. And they say they can't send it back because it's toxic chemicals. So think about that. Anyway, so I had all this hair dye, and I figured over the weekend, I'll do it. So you put it in, supposed to leave it on for 5 minutes. I left it on for 2.
Okay.
You see the results.
It did its job. I wonder what 5 would have looked like.
Yeah, I know. It certainly covered the gray, except it was a little bit more than I wanted.
I mean,
so we say it's a little more darker than I wanted.
But overall, are you satisfied?
No.
No? Okay. Well,
next time I'm just going to use, what women use because theirs turns out pretty good.
Well, what are you going to do with all the boxes then?
You want some?
Dave, I do not have any gray hairs. Wait, do we have the same hair color?
No.
No?
No, yours is much darker.
Or would I just leave it in longer? Is that how it will work?
Yeah, I guess so.
Okay. Well, I'm not there yet, but when I do get there, you'll be the first person I call.
Yeah.
Like, hey, you still got those 800 boxes of hair stuff?
I probably will because I don't think I can, I'm not going to use this again, I don't believe.
Well, A for effort. At least you tried.
Yeah, at least I tried.
And, now I guess you can sell that stuff on Facebook Marketplace or something.
I don't know. They say it's toxic chemicals.
Yeah, well, at least the company wouldn't take it back. But I don't know. That's you look good. You look good, Dave. I'll give you that.
Well, thank you. I'll go out tonight and see if I can.
Let me know what the ladies say.
Yeah, I will.
Last night, women's basketball got in action to start their season, picking up the victory 94-54 over Grand Canyon, of course, coached by former assistant Winston Gandy. Let's go to today's cuts here, Dave. This will be cut number 2. This is Dawn Staley talking about chemistry with new players on the roster.
There's, in a team in which we got 4 new players, we got total 7 players who haven't played, a whole lot of minutes for us. It's good to have that instant chemistry from them playing high school and AAU together. So that's something that we can bank. We just have to start connecting. Just have a connection out there. 4 new starters, so it's just going to take a little bit of time for us to create the chemistry that we need to be better, especially defensively, because we got a lot of work. It's a lot different than what we used to, so we have to figure it out. And we're in the season now, so games are going to have to be that. And it's not our normal way of doing things, but it's the cards that we've been dealt.
And again, last night picking up the victory 94-54, and that's, one of the things to watch for early on in the season for South Carolina is how this new group plays together. And you have a mix in your starting five. You got Joyce Edwards back, Tessa Johnson back, Raven Johnson, but Medina Okote and Tanai Latson, obviously two new names, via the transfer portal there. And both those girls had very good debuts for the Gamecocks last night. Latson with 20 points, leading the team, a rebound, 4 assists, only 2 turnovers last night. Very solid start for her. Okote, 12 points, 4 or 5 from the field. Grabbed 4 rebounds herself, no turnovers as well. So solid start to their time here at South Carolina. And obviously, they're going to be really, really important to what this team's success is going to be. And you see as well somebody like Raven Johnson, who last night was very efficient from 3 for 5 from beyond the arc there, made a third of the team's 3-pointers. Tessa Johnson looking like tournament Tessa, making 3 of her own last night and really getting off to a good start. And again, that's why you play these kind of games against those lower end competition teams like Grand Canyon to kind of get the bugs out and get the feel right and all that kind of stuff. You'll have Bowling Green coming up on Friday. Clemson's coming up here very soon. Southern Cal is going to be the first big test. Obviously, Juju Watkins not going to be playing in that game as she's out for the year, obviously with her injury, but you'll get several tests throughout non-conference play before you get into the meat of the SEC schedule coming up at the beginning of the year. And like every single year, we come into the season with the expectation that this team's going to make a deep tournament run, be in the Final Four, and be in the mix once again for the national championship, where unfortunately came up short a year ago, and obviously you're going into this year without what you were expecting to be 2 of your key contributors in Chloe Kitts and Ashley Watkins. So depth is maybe not as deep as it has been. And that's something that, we always praise Dawn Staley teams for, is just how deep into their bench they go. So you're down to those key contributors, and we'll see how much everybody can play their role, coming off the bench this year. And Adel Tack, Maddie McDaniel had good minutes last night. And again, we'll see how that shapes and factors throughout the season. But good start of the year. I will say it was agonizing how long this game took. And women's basketball, I've always been a fan of the quarter system in basketball, and quite literally men's college basketball is the only level of basketball that still uses a 2 halves method. I wish they'd go to quarters, because I feel like it kind of lets the game flow a little bit better. But for whatever reason last night, because the officials were so heavy on the whistles and reviews and all that kind of stuff, this game took forever for a game that ended up being a 40-point differential there. So hopefully that's not the case when they play Bowling Green coming up on Friday night. And then tonight, over at Colonial Life Arena, 7 o'clock tip for men's basketball as they take on North Carolina A&T to get their season rolling. And, we had Coach Paris on here a couple weeks ago. We had Tanner Bronson on the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour with us on Friday, and they're both excited, man. And look, every coach is excited about a new season, excited about new players and all that kind of stuff. But it kind of seems like, and it's not just me saying this, I've seen a lot of other people out there writing about this and tweeting about it and all that kind of stuff. There seems to be a different sense of excitement for this team and what they're going to be capable of this year. Very experienced. That's something that Tanner Bronson talked to us about on Friday, and it's hard to directly compare the experience to a couple seasons ago. But he said, in terms of 1,000-point scorers or guys that you expect to be 1,000-point scorers by the end of the year, you have a few on the team in that regard. And, hopefully that kind of experience carries over to being successful and getting yourself back to the NCAA tournament this year. Now, it's not going to be easy, obviously, because this is a grinder of a schedule, as it's always going to be in the SEC. But I go back to what Coach Paris told us on this show here a couple weeks ago, and the way that they set up their schedule intentionally to kind of ease yourself in. Now, you're going to have some challenging competition, Butler, Northwestern, Virginia Tech, and the SEC, ACC Challenge. Of course, Clemson, as you do every single year in the non-conference. But I'm just looking at this purely in KenPom ratings. Your first 3 games are against the teams ranked 353rd, 287th, and 313th in KenPom going into the year. And look, those ratings aren't the end-all, be-all, and we've certainly seen plenty of upsets. Last year, North Florida was 266 in KenPom rankings, and they obviously came in here and beat South Carolina to open the season. So that doesn't tell you the whole story there, but you give yourself a better opportunity going up against teams like that and just kind of figuring out the chemistry. Again, Dawn talking about it there with her new players last night and kind of gelling together and figure things out. As Bill and I have been joking about, if you're going to go over to CLA tonight to watch this team, make sure you have your press guide in hand so you can tell who's who. Because, you have a few returners with Cam Scott and Studi and Michi Johnson a second time around, Jordan Butler, those kind of guys, but a lot of new faces to this team, not just from the portal, guys like Eli Ellis that are also going to play key factors on this team this season that you'll see in action coming up tonight. Again, tip-off at 7 o'clock, pregame coverage starting at 6:30 right here on the game. And here's hoping that you can get yourself back in that conversation, right? We look at this as very much a prove-it year for Lamont Paris. And just like with pretty much every single coach at South Carolina Athletics, you're in a position where the athletic director is not the guy that hires you. Ray Tanner hired Lamont Paris. Jeremiah Donati did not hire him. So, and especially coming off how rough last year was, they lost a lot of close games, but still the record is what it is. You got to prove yourself this year, right? And obviously the hope is that you're good enough to get back to the NCAA tournament and then some, but that's easier said than done. But I'm excited to see what happens tonight. Excited to see how this team plays. They look, and it feels like they're going to be an exciting team to watch. They were shooting deep shots the other week against NC State in that exhibition game the following Sunday, and it just sounds like, because we didn't get to see the game because it wasn't televised, it just sounds like it's going to be a fun brand of basketball to watch. And hopefully that's the case, because here's the thing. This entire year has been brutally rough from a men's sport standpoint. Men's basketball, back last year in the spring, bad. Baseball, bad. And then obviously football, the season's not gone the way that we wanted it to. So I'm hoping, much like really the previous year, men's basketball made the run to the tournament. The baseball team, I know they fired Coach Kingston, but they still made the postseason and got to a regional at least. And then football did what it did, going 9-3 and sniffing at least the college football playoff. So it kind of seems like the catalyst for all that happening next year, hopefully positively, across Gamecock sports, is men's basketball getting things rolling with a good season. So again, we'll see what happens tonight, and Jack will be over there. You'll follow along with him on Gamecock Central and Twitter, and again, we'll talk plenty about that tomorrow. We'll have sound from Coach Paris and all those kind of things to really dive into what happened in their season opener, and hopefully this time we start off by talking about a team that's 1-0 and not one that's 0-1 losing to North Florida. So we'll certainly see there. We'll get back into football coming up next, because I want to explore the conversation of how the perception of Coach Beamer has changed just in these last handful of weeks, because I do think it's worth talking about, and we'll hit that coming up next. It is the halftime show. Tyler Head and Captain Dave along with you on your Tuesday on the Game.
Another disappointing night. Came in here expecting to win. We said all week, just get it to the fourth quarter and find a way to win it in the fourth quarter and finish. We didn't finish last week, and we got it to the fourth quarter tonight. And they made the plays in the fourth quarter, and we didn't. They made the plays on offense, defense, and special teams, and that's what good teams do. And right now, we're not making enough of them to get over the hump.
Welcome back in. It's the halftime show. Tyler Head, Captain Dave, along with you here on your Tuesday on the Game. That was Coach Beamer following Saturday's 30-14 loss to Ole Miss, just talking about being disappointed. And I think that is the perfect way to describe that game on Saturday, is disappointing, as once again, you were in position to possibly make something happen, being down only one score in the fourth quarter, as you'd find yourself in many times this year. But again, the offense really couldn't muster anything up, save for a short field after a muff punt on your opening drive, and then one successful shot play to Nick Harver. Really not a whole lot to write home about the way the offense performed on Saturday, which is why the move to fire Mike Shula was made on Sunday. And now we've been talking about, for the past 2 days, the future of the offensive coordinator spot. But I want to kind of round this conversation back to Shane Beamer. And Beamer talks all the time whenever, he's asked about something going wrong or losing a game or whatever. He says it all starts with me, which it does. He's the head coach. He's the CEO, president, whatever you want to call it, of the organization that is Gamecock football. So it all does fall under his umbrella at the end of the day. And one thing that I've noticed these past couple of weeks is a bit of a shift in perception, if that is the right way to phrase it, on how people view and talk about Coach Beamer. Again, I've been here covering this program since the end of the 2022 season, where, again, at that point in time, it was maybe the highest it had been in the Beamer era, before last year, obviously, making the run at the college football playoff. But vibes were great, right? Here's a guy that took a program that would look like it was destined for a 6-6 year and was able to pull off two of the biggest upsets in program history and, get them to 8-4 and play in a good bowl game against Notre Dame, a brand in college football, and the vibes are great. And then, obviously, had the disappointment of 5-7 year, but last year you pulled right back up, went 9-3, and were at least in the conversation for the college football playoff. But even through the negative times of like that 5-7 year, and even when last year didn't get off to the best start, I didn't see a lot of negativity specifically pointed at Coach Beamer. Now I am, and I go back to a couple of weeks ago now, after the Oklahoma game, where the offense just looked really bad, only scored 7 points famously, and just couldn't do anything to compete with an Oklahoma offense that didn't have like its most phenomenal day over there at Williams-Brice Stadium. And that was, of course, after the game where Jack asked what I thought was a very legitimate question about, hey, any thoughts on changing things on offense? And Beamer snapped back, made a change last week, Jack, in reference to Lonnie Teasley being fired. And that in and of itself went viral. And again, I thought it was a legitimate question, especially considering the fact that Beamer had never made an in-season staff change. So if you make one, it's going to lead people to believe you're willing to make another one, which, lo and behold, a couple weeks later, you obviously did. So, because we can all see it. We can all see the offense was struggling. And it's worth asking, hey, you going to make a change? Was today enough? Was that performance against Oklahoma enough to warrant moving on from Mike Shula? For Beamer, at least at that point in time, it was not. Ends up making the decision a couple weeks later. But that moment is where I started to see people really start to change their attitudes on Coach Beamer. And look, I understand Twitter and message boards are not a representation of how everyone feels. In fact, both those places are going to skew negative more often than not. But in just my time here, I've never seen as much negativity around Coach Beamer than what I've seen in these past couple weeks. And going on a losing streak like this will bring that out of you. Now, they went 0 for October back in 2023. Didn't win a single one of those games, but I didn't quite see it to this level. And I do think there comes a point when, especially in a situation like where the offense is struggling and, Beamer kept saying, hey, we're evaluating every week. We're looking at this, looking at that. And you weren't seeing enough changes, enough differences to really make something happen. That is where people will get frustrated, right? And again, you did finally make the change, which is good. I just don't know where if people have all the faith that you're going to get what you want out of it. Again, we talk about this being the most important hire of the Beamer era because again, if the offense is still struggling a year from now, then we're talking about Coach Beamer's job and its security at that point in time. So you have to get this right. I have the sense a lot of people don't have the faith right now that he's going to get it right. And again, we don't even know who the candidates are, who they're looking at or interviewing and all that kind of stuff. I'm just kind of talking about the perception here. But that is the importance of making this hire, in my opinion, is getting yourself back in good graces with the fan base. And look, the vibes of the fan base aren't the end-all be-all of how your program is going to be, but in a day and age today, especially when you're asking people to give their hard-earned money to help your program be as successful as possible through NIL and all that kind of stuff, having a fan base that's more negative towards you as a coach certainly hurts you more than it's going to help you. And again, this is all kind of materialized in these past couple of weeks, mainly stemming from how much the offense has struggled and the resistance that he had to it, right? And that's what it kind of goes back to, the situation with Jack and all that kind of stuff. It wasn't for the specific response, I guess, but more of the trying to let people, I'm trying to find the right words to describe this, maybe making the offense seem like it wasn't what it seemed, right? Because it struggled the entire year. And, after the Vanderbilt game or whatever, Jack asked Coach Beamer about the statistics being towards the bottom of the SEC. And he said, well, not everybody's played the same competition we have, which I think that's a fair assessment at that point in time. But it didn't get better. And he did allude to it as a few weeks passed that, hey, these stats are alarming, but wasn't indicating that a change was going to be made until obviously Sunday when that happened. And look, I like Coach Beamer. I firmly believe that he views this as a dream job, as he said over and over again when being asked about the openings at Virginia Tech and stuff like that. And I have full confidence he's going to be your coach in 2026 because, last year bought him that time. But it is interesting to kind of see this crossroads of where he's at when it comes to the perception of the fan base, how people view him and that kind of stuff. Because I do think a lot of the good grace that you built up for yourself a year ago has dwindled a little bit, right? And it doesn't help that, if you were having these offensive struggles like a freshman quarterback or something like that, then that's one thing. But you have this gem of an athletic talent, this freak of an athlete at quarterback, and it just kind of feels like, and what, again, I'm going to assume is probably going to be his last year in college football because I think he's going to go to the draft. We'll see if he decides to do that or not, but that's the way that I lean. It feels like it's just wasting that opportunity, right? And this is, you have to remember, this is a South Carolina football fan base that has not had this long sustained history of success. Chris Lowe mentioned it to us earlier in our interview with him. There have been two coaches that have won 9 games for South Carolina, and that was Steve Spurrier and Shane Beamer. You know what I mean? And the Spurrier years were over a decade ago now. So this isn't a program that is rich with the history of consistently being at the top of college football. So when you see that window of opportunity open, you got to capitalize. You got to make the most of it. And again, it seemed like last year, you saw the crack in the door, you pushed it open. Now you got to walk through it and take that next step. And that's what this year was supposed to be in year number 2 with Lenore Sellers at the helm. And it's just been everything but that. And again, you've had plenty of good quarterbacks over the years, but never one with the abilities and skill sets of a Lenore Sellers. And you don't know when and if you're ever going to get one of those guys again. And when Aaron Nolan was highly recruited out of high school, people like Cutter Woods a lot. Landon Duckworth, he's a 4-star in the 26th class, but there's no guarantee any of those guys are going to be as good as Lenore Sellers was at his best a year ago. And if this is his last hurrah in college football and he goes off to the NFL, it's going to be nothing, or a lot of people are going to ask the question of, man, what could have been? If we had different offense coordinator, if we had different, abilities to help him in his last year, what that season could have been, could you have made a run at the playoff and all that kind of stuff? And obviously now, we're never going to know because your bet is made, and at best you can go 6-6, which is going to involve pulling off a huge upset next weekend in College Station. But kind of getting back to my main point, I've seen a shift in perception in how people talk about Coach Beamer and the program and all that kind of stuff that unfortunately is skewing negative. And I don't blame you for that because of how rough this season has been. But it's one of those things that, he's got work to do to kind of mend that fence a little bit, right? And that starts off with getting the right offensive coordinator hire, getting somebody that excites the fan base. And that was the criticism of the Dow Loggins hire. And Beamer famously went on his rant 3 years ago now, when that hire was made, about the questioning of that hire, because when people look at it and say, okay, this guy was, running offenses in the NFL that were in the 30s, and there's only 32 teams in the NFL, in the 30s in most statistical categories. He got awarded the worst play caller in the NFL one year. Like, not things that make you feel warm and fuzzy when it comes to hiring your offensive coordinator. You don't need something like that. Again, you need something that's going to get people interested, going to get people excited about what the prospects of this offense and this team are going to be in 2025. And again, it's on him to make that decision. We don't know who the candidates are. We don't know who he's talking to, what connections that he has, but this hire is going to be massive, very massive in terms of the perception of what next year's team is going to be and what the hope is going into the year, and obviously the interest and potential giving attitude of fans are in what's going to be a very critical year for Beamer in 2026. We'll take a spin around college football coming up next and discuss some of the other games that happened over the weekend that we didn't get a chance to get to yesterday as the halftime show rolls along. Tyler Head and Captain Dave on your Tuesday on the Game. All right, welcome back in. Halftime show. Tyler Head, Captain Dave rolling along on your Tuesday here on The Game. I'm not above correcting myself and appreciate you guys that weighed in to make sure I got this right. I misquoted what Chris Lowe had said earlier on today when we talked to him. It was, to say it correctly, Coach Beamer and Coach Spurrier are the only two to win 9 games in the regular season this side of the millennium. I know Joe Moore Morrison won 10 back in 84. Muschamp won 9, only 8 of those coming in the regular season back in 2017. But that was the point that Chris Lowe was making in reference to Coach Beamer and Spurrier being the only ones to do it in a regular season at South Carolina since the turn of the century. So there's your correction. Appreciate you guys pointing that out a little bit earlier. And, you know, Holtz also had an 8-3 season and won a bowl game too. So there's your correction. Again, appreciate you guys pointing that out. Getting into greater things in college football from over the weekend, didn't really get a chance to look at. You know, when you look at the lineup for the weekend like we had this past weekend, you could say, maybe not a whole lot of things stick out to you, which means you're probably getting set for a lot of chaos and a lot of upsets. One game, though, that was a marquee matchup was Oklahoma taking on Tennessee. It was a 7:30 game on ABC, and you know you may not have seen most of it because they were playing at the same time as Carolina. Now that game went a whole lot later. I got home like right at the start of the fourth quarter of that one, and it was a good, compelling game. And I picked Tennessee to win. I thought Tennessee just offensively was better, and that was going to be the difference. And it ended up not being the difference because Joey Aguilar kept turning the ball over, and that was a criticism of Aguilar coming into Tennessee was, this guy's throwing a lot of interceptions from his time at Appalachian State. Is that going to be a problem? And that ended up being a problem on Saturday as Tennessee fell to Oklahoma. And Oklahoma, again, when we looked at their schedule following beating South Carolina, you could realistically say, hey, maybe they don't win another game. But for now, they're at least keeping their hopes alive in the college football playoff. And we'll see where they're ranked coming up tonight. But for Tennessee, 3 losses, man. I don't know if that's going to be enough, and really don't have any like notable quality wins to hang your hat on at this point in time. Like that was one of the first true playoff eliminator games that we've gotten for the back half of this season. Now Tennessee will have a chance to play another, assuming ranked team at that point in time, and Vanderbilt at the end of the regular season. But New Mexico State and Florida, their next 2 opponents, and again, which goes back to how heartbreaking for them that loss to Georgia was, because if that kicker makes the kick in regulation, then they only have 1 loss, or they only have 2 losses, and they'll have a win over a Georgia team that would probably still be ranked somewhere relatively high, and that'd be a quality win for them. They don't have that, obviously, and again, I just don't think they have enough to bolster their resume in terms of putting themselves in a position to make the college ball playoff as a 9-3 team. In fact, with how much parity's in the SEC this year, I don't think any 9-3 teams in the SEC, save for somebody that could miraculously make the conference championship, is going to be able to find their way into the college ball playoff via the SEC. Another team that kept their hopes alive, at least for another week, was Texas Longhorns. Again, there's been no team that's been more of a roller coaster this year, it seems like, than Texas, because I think we looked at week number 1 against Oklahoma and said, okay, you know, they got to be by Ohio State, or week number 1 against Ohio State. They lost to Ohio State, no shame in that, on the road, 7-point game, whatever, even though the offense didn't look all that great. But the next handful of weeks, we saw, okay, man, they're just not that good. They lose to Florida, embarrassing loss there. They reeled off 4 straight, quietly. Now, there have been some chaotic games in there, including overtime against Kentucky and Mississippi State, and they held on for dear life against Vanderbilt. They went up 34-10. Vanderbilt comes storming back, and if they're able to recover that onside kick very late in the game, who knows what happens with Diego Pavia and the momentum that offense had at that point in time. But they won, and that, at the end of the day, that's the most important thing. And, you know, they are really, since losing to Florida, they've been in elimination mode ever since then. Now, it is worth noting, they only have 1 conference loss. They still could, maybe possibly, make themselves into the SEC championship game if things fall their way. You're going to have to count on A&M and Alabama and stuff to lose some games before you get there. But they're not outside of that chance. And again, they've got perhaps the best loss in all of college football by 7 points to the number 1 team in the country in Ohio State. So as much as we were ready to write them off only a couple of weeks ago, Texas still in position to make things happen. Now, they do have to go to Georgia, not this weekend, but next weekend. And they do have to play A&M in the rivalry game coming up. I believe that is on Black Friday night. I think that's the nightcap for Black Friday this year is the Texas A&M game. And again, A&M looks like a buzzsaw right now, and we'll see if they get revenge from a year ago. But at this point in time, still Texas is alive when it comes to their playoff hopes. And Georgia, they themselves keep finding ways to win games. When it looks like they are dead to rights in ways or trailing for a lot of the game, they make plays when they need to. Gunnar Stockton made plays. The Chauncey Bowens ripped off a long touchdown run to put them over on Saturday to get past Florida in the cocktail party. And credit to Florida, by the way, for a team that had rallied around Billy Napier a couple times. I did question what their effort was going to be going into that game because they seemed to like Napier so much. But, I mean, they played hard for Billy Gonzalez, man. That was a well-played game by Florida. Unfortunately for them, Georgia obviously ended up, sneaking out there in the end. And, Georgia's one of those teams that I think we brought this up with Jamie Bradford yesterday. They could make a run all the way to the national championship game, or they could get bounced in the first round of the playoff if they end up getting there. Still got to play Texas and Georgia Tech in the next handful of weeks. Mississippi State coming up this weekend as well. So it's not a lot for them to make it in, but there's just something about teams that find their way to win. Even as ugly as the game may be, finding a way to win is a hard trait to have. And Georgia, as of right now, is doing that and doing that successfully. But wild weekend across the SEC, wild weekend across college football in general as well. Miami may have played themselves out of playoff contention by losing on the road. First time they left the state of Florida this entire season, believe it or not, going out there to Dallas, taking on SMU, losing that game in overtime. Carson Beck throws a costly pick down there by the goal line, and they dropped to 2 losses on the season. I'm going to be very interested to see where the playoff committee ranks them coming up tonight, because I don't know how much of a pathway they have to possibly claw their way back in to being in a position to just make it as an at-large, because it doesn't seem like the ACC is going to have more than a one-loss team in its conference championship. Virginia's still undefeated in conference, though they did lose to NC State in a non-conference game. I know that's still crazy to say. But Georgia Tech, Pittsburgh, Louisville, SMU, Duke, all those teams one loss right now. And obviously, you talk about Louisville and SMU having tiebreakers over Miami, so they would need both those teams to lose multiple games in conference play down the stretch to have a shot at making the ACC championship. And as good as their win against Miami was to open, or Notre Dame was to open up the season, I don't think they're going to be ranked above them. And that, the one thing they could maybe hope for is being close to Notre Dame, to where when it came down to the final decision-making process, they could jump over them because of having that head-to-head win. I just don't think with the losses that they've had that they're going to be able to do that. And then you look at their remaining schedule, they don't have really quality opponents left to try and catapult themselves in there either. And here's a stat for you, because it makes total sense when you hear it. I just wasn't aware of it. Mario Cristobal's 4-9 in the month of November at Miami, which that very much checks out. Again, they lost on the last day of the regular season last year to Syracuse. That blew their chances of making the playoff at that point in time, because they could have gone in and played for the SEC title and probably been a lock either way, no matter what the outcome of that was. But they lost that game. They've now lost this one to SMU, already lost a couple weeks ago to Louisville. For some reason, Mario Cristobal always finds a way, no matter how talented his team is, or how good his team is. And I think we looked at that Miami roster as one of the better ones in college football. They find a way to lose games that you don't think they really, because I think they're like a 2-touchdown favorite going on the road to SMU. They find a way to lose games they otherwise don't really have any business losing. And then maybe that's just the Mario Cristobal effect. But it seems like another year where they're going to be a wasted opportunity in terms of making the college football playoff, outside of something kind of miraculous happening in these next handful of weeks, which, who knows? This has been a chaotic season. Maybe things will fall their way, but right now I'm certainly not counting on it. We'll come back and we'll wrap up the day, and let's talk again about those college football playoff rankings set to come out tonight at 7 o'clock, and see where we think some teams might end up landing. That's coming up next. So wrap up the halftime show on your Tuesday on the Game. All right, welcome back in. It is the halftime show. Tyler Head and Captain Dave wrapping things up here on your Tuesday on the game. Busy night, obviously, men's basketball in action tonight, taking on North Carolina A&T. Again, tip-off at 7 o'clock. Pregame coverage to start here on the game at 6:30 with Derek Scott and Judge Casey Manning as they get you set for a fresh new season where again, you're really, really hoping you see significant improvements from a year ago, being able to close out games. It's really funny, and I guess we haven't made this comparison yet. The men's basketball team's inability to close out games, just like football's inability to close out games this year. Really funny how those two things kind of mirrored each other this year. But hopefully Paris's crew gets things started off on the right track tonight with a win against North Carolina A&T, and we'll have some fun things to talk about tomorrow and through this non-conference slate coming up here over the course of the next couple of weeks before conference play begins at the beginning of the new year. And again, as I mentioned earlier, I think as this year proved, men's basketball will set the tone for what this upcoming year is going to be, and hopefully it's a lot better than last year was, because men's sports just did not do good this past year when it came to football, baseball, and obviously men's basketball as well. While that game is going on, really, quite frankly, as soon as it tips off, we'll get the first reveal of the college football playoff top 25 rankings for 2025, as we'll get one of these every single week through the conference championships, will be Selection Sunday the day after that, and setting the field for the second edition of the 12-team college football playoff. And I'm curious to see how different these rankings are compared to, like, the AP poll, right? And I have a sneaking suspicion they're actually going to be pretty similar to start things off at the very least. The AP poll does influence the college football playoff poll at the end of the day. But for reference, the AP poll has Ohio State, Indiana, Texas A&M, Alabama, Georgia, Oregon, Ole Miss, BYU, Texas Tech, Notre Dame, Oklahoma, and Virginia as its top 12 as of right now. So that means if the college football playoff were to have started today, that would include, you'd have a representative from all the power conferences there. And then I guess, no. Virginia would be in, if you're using the AP poll, Virginia would be in as the representative from the ACC. Oklahoma would actually be the first team out because Memphis is your current highest-ranked G5 team, assuming that they'd be a conference champion. They would vault in, which means your last two teams in would be Virginia and Memphis as of right now. And again, a lot of football to be played over the course of these next couple of weeks, but that is your AP poll, and we'll see if the college ball playoff does reflect that. Looking up and down at the AP poll, the only thing that I kind of marked as a difference that I could see was maybe flipping like 6 and 7, where right now you have Oregon at 6 in the AP poll, Ole Miss at 7. I think you could possibly put Ole Miss a little bit higher based on strength of record and all that kind of stuff. And now Oregon has a really good loss in Indiana, a better loss than Ole Miss's loss to Georgia. And again, it's kind of splitting hairs here, and the difference between 6 and 7 at this point in time really doesn't matter. But that's kind of the only thing that I saw that could be different. I think it's going to kind of follow the trend of the AP poll, like the top 5, Ohio State, Indiana, Texas A&M, Bama, and Georgia. Of course, Ohio State, Indiana, and Texas A&M are your last 3. Well, actually, BYU at number 8 is the other one. 3 of your last 4 remaining undefeated Power 4 teams, and I fully expect those 3 teams to be at the very top of the rankings coming up tonight. Though you can make a case, Indiana could maybe be number 1 because, like, Ohio State's been road grading everybody. That's fine. They've got wins over Indiana and a Texas team that's climbing in the polls as of right now. But I really think out of all the undefeated teams, I think the best win is Indiana's road victory at Oregon. Again, the team that's number 6 in the AP poll as of right now. I think that is at least worthy of the discussion, right? Because I think overall the schedule between Ohio State and Indiana is pretty comparable. And again, these two teams are on a collision course to play for the Big Ten championship. Maybe both as undefeated teams because they don't play each other in the regular season. And again, would anybody have believed you if you told them that Indiana would be an undefeated team playing for the Big Ten title 3 years ago? Absolutely not. But it's the reality that we live in as of right now. But I wouldn't be shocked. I would not be shocked if maybe they got catapulted to being number 1. And also, worth noting as well, maybe A&M. They do have a win over a top 10 team in Notre Dame based on the college football playoff rankings, though they did lose to Texas. Excuse me, not Texas. They are undefeated. But you could make a case that A&M could maybe have that top spot too. But if I had to guess right now, I'd probably go with Ohio State. But we'll see how it all shakes out. At the end of the day, I'm interested to see, because again, we got a lot of football to be played. All this stuff's going to end up working itself out. I'm interested to see how the committee uses their supposed new criteria in this instance, because they told us before the season. Now, I assume they were doing this anyway, but they reiterated, and okay, that's fine, that they want to really value strength of record, quality of wins, quality of losses, and all those kind of things to make these new rankings. And I think what we've seen out of the AP poll this year has kind of reflected that a little bit. We've seen some pretty radical shifts for teams rising and falling significant amounts, 10, 12 plus spots at times, based off one weekend of results. And I think that's kind of what we're going to see with the CFP poll as well, with teams, hey, you could go from being 20th one week to 8th the next week, or you go from being 5th to 21st, depending on losses and wins and all those kind of things. And, like, I'm here for that, right? Because I do think one win over a significantly good team or one loss against a bad team should shift the perception of you pretty wildly. So we'll see if the College Football Playoff Committee does decide to make those kind of changes, and we'll see what the first poll results look at coming out tonight. We'll certainly talk about that coming up tomorrow as well. That'll do it for the halftime show. For Captain Dave and Bill Gunner, I'm Tyler Head. Thanks for following along. Enjoy the rest of your Tuesday. Post-game show coming up next. It's Brews Day, by the way. I believe Ryan Brewer will be in here with the guys as your Tuesday rolls along here on The Game.